So, Scarlett Johansson situation. Let's start with that one. My favorite topic. Jonathan knows my favorite topic. So, I will give a summary and then you two can just jump in and correct me. Um, Scarlett Johansson sent out a message to NPR where she basically said almost a year ago, OpenAI reached out and said, "Hey, we think it'd be cool to have your voice here as one of our voices for one of our AI assistants." And then it turned out that she said, "No, I'm good on this." And then, according to her, uh, before GPT-4o came out or something, they tried to interact with her again and say, "Hey, it'd be really cool if we could partner." And she was like, "I'm good, bro," and said no. And then just recently, a couple days ago, OpenAI came out and said, "Hey, the voice Sky, which is from a different person, we're taking that voice down." And for me, when I first heard that voice like months ago, I was like, "This sounds like Scarlett Johansson." And then now people on the internet are like, "No, it's not Scarlett Johansson. You're making this up or whatnot." So that's how I interpreted things. One, um, Krista, I'd just love to hear what you think about this whole entire thing and kind of just go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is a really fascinating issue for me. I've been trying to write about the need for right of publicity reform for several years now to address the concern about deepfakes and synthetic media, including voice depictions. And it just so happens that right now, while the Senate is considering some issues on the scope of right of publicity, we have this blow up about Scarlett Johansson and OpenAI, which really articulates the problem very clearly. So, a lot of people are saying, well, maybe there should be some sort of fair use. So, is it a copyright violation to do this? Well, if they train it on something other than her voice, is that allowed? Right of publicity works differently than copyright law. So, although copyright law has exceptions like fair use, right of publicity is very different. Right of publicity is a state law right. It exists separately from state to state with some variations. Typically, it prevents the commercial misappropriation of someone's name, image, or likeness. And this includes depictions that are sound-alikes or look-alikes of a person. What matters is how the public would perceive that name, image, or likeness, including a voice. So even if you use a sound alike to try to make something that's like Scarlett Johansson's voice and don't actually train it on her voice, it can still violate the right of publicity because it's causing consumers to believe that that voice is Scarlett Johansson's voice. So if that's the case, if a court were to find that, then OpenAI would be liable to Scarlett Johansson for that right of publicity violation.
Well, well said. Also, we've seen cases like this happen before, right? Didn't Ford want to get Bette Midler and she said no, and then they happened
Yes.
to find someone else with her voice that sounded just like her?
Exactly, right. So you mentioned in previous episodes, I believe, this Bette Midler example where Ford tried to use a sound alike, and the court said, no, you can't just use a sound alike of someone. Fundamentally, the value that you're trying to extract is not the value of the sound alike. You're trying to extract the value that Bette Midler brings to this by making this sound like her. And I think here Sam Altman might be getting a little bit in trouble. There was a tweet recently saying her, which sure sounds like he was trying to pick somebody that was a sound alike for Scarlett Johansson to voice this.
So I was just thinking, like, the twice reaching out to her and then him tweeting her and then them also taking down the voice. It
Yes.
just feels like, I mean, if you were on Scarlett Joe's legal team right now, would you be like, "Oh,
Oh, so ecstatic. Yeah, I mean, it's great. Although, although I think that given that it was up for a very limited time, this is not a situation like copyright law where you have these large statutory violations that are available for copyright infringement. Right of publicity, they look at what the actual damages are. And that's going to be a little bit different. It might not be that high. And in my mind, I think all that Scarlett Johansson really wants is for them not to use a voice that sounds like her. One of the things that I mentioned in this blog post that I just sent to you a few minutes ago is that one concern that I imagine that Scarlett Johansson had is that if she were to authorize this use of her voice, there's no way for her to decide and control how users are using her voice, and they might be using it for things that she doesn't want. And in particular, OpenAI recently announced that they were exploring not safe for work content. And that would be really difficult, I think, for Scarlett Johansson to have her voice associated with perhaps sexual or graphic content that she doesn't approve of. So I totally understand her decision. I think the remedies here, now that they've removed that voice, are going to be limited.
Okay, and that voice, I had access to it for like maybe 6 or 7 months because I was paying $20 a month for ChatGPT Premium, and I know Sam Altman said a couple days ago we've been making significant revenue off that product. Would their legal counsel be able to say, hey, we want to look at the revenue they made for the last 6 months and see if we can get a piece of that?
Yeah, there could potentially be some ability to get some of what OpenAI made from that. Although I really think that given Scarlett Johansson's position, all she really wanted was for this to get removed and not used in a way that she didn't approve of. And it is possible that she can get some damages out of it.
Yeah, I feel terrible. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Sorry, I was just going to ask. I mean, it sounds like there's precedent for this. I was just curious if either of you know, how do they measure the likeness of two voices? Where ScarJo definitely has her own voice, and then they were using this other voice that I'm assuming it came from an actor. Maybe they selected because they sound like ScarJo. But how would ScarJo determine that, like, hey, this really does sound like my voice?
Bette Midler case is going to be a great example for this if they did in fact choose a sound-alike of Scarlett Johansson's voice. So what the court is going to look at, this is going to be a fact determination for the jury. You know, was this an attempt to misappropriate Scarlett Johansson's voice and likeness to try to derive revenue by sounding like her? And so the fact question will look into things like, are there any emails or tweets that suggest that they were trying to replicate her voice when they were interviewing? Are there any notes that say, we want somebody that sounds like Scarlett Johansson or has these characteristics to their voice that are similar to Scarlett Johansson's characteristics? And then they'll also perhaps consider things like surveys of whether users of the platform believed that that was Scarlett Johansson's voice.
Yeah. Now, Jonathan, you got me self-conscious because I'm going to say it again. Yeah, I thought that was her voice when I first heard it on ChatGPT.
Well, and in fact, what you're kind of describing, and like, I don't want to make a joke out of it, but like when you read when we had a podcast a couple of weeks ago where we talked about people who are choosing role play and they're using characters and they're building relationships with AI agents that are literally trained for that. And then every now and again, there's a policy change or a country decides that they don't want to allow those. And they have to shut off access or something else happens. And the effect that people describe is they've been broken up with. And they go through real emotional pain, similar to what a breakup. And so, you know, we're kind of joking about you here, but there's a lot of people that had been using this AI agent that sounded a lot like Scarlett Johansson for a couple of months. And now that it's just gone. And they're going through this kind of like emotional period where, hey, it's different now. It's not the same. I don't have this relationship. And you don't have to have been doing anything at SFW. You could have just been like, you know, it was just in your ear. You were getting it all the time, and it was helpful.
I was just gonna,
no mercy.
As in, that was such a great point because I remember there was I think Andreessen Horowitz funds either replica or character AI, and character AI was known for they were allowing not safe for work content or something. And
replica does too, by the way.
Oh, good to know. And when they took the check from Andreessen Horowitz, I guess they kind of said, nah, some of this is getting crazy. We got to clean up. And just thousands of people were on Reddit, just like, what's going on here and everything. And I was like, oh, this is really interesting. But then I started thinking about it, like, we were talking about that voice and whatnot, but I was like, wow, like I can't use a voice now. I can use these 4 other different types of voices, but I kind of like that voice. And it's like, wow, isn't that a lot of power for OpenAI to come in unilaterally and be like, nope, can't have that. Now, imagine if I was like, I look at it as a relationship, as this is like a significant person to me or something. There's a lot of angry people right now who are like, you just got into my personal life. Like, do we have any rights here or something? So, Krista, I'd love to hear what you think about this. And you explained that how in common law, sometimes things kind of evolve through the courts. So we don't have to actually have a bill on this or protection. So I'm going to stop now. So thanks.
I'll take it more from the side of how that could impact Scarlett Johansson's rights, because you can imagine other potential harms that could arise to her. I imagine since starring in the Her movie, she is probably very much aware of the fact that individuals can develop relationships with these AIs. And what if that opens her up to stalking or other types of harms from people trying to go after her for that kind of sadness that they experience when they lose access to their AI that sounds just like her. Will they go pursue her when they can't get access to the AI? I think there could be much higher harms there. So I think she was absolutely right to deny the use of her voice for this
Yeah,
purpose, given
I
how expensive this could be.
I completely 1000% agree with you, and I want to also stress that when she saw that demo of her voice basically on there, and it was a live announcement, it's like feeling it must have been felt like being violated right there. As far as like, this is something I personally said I didn't want to do, and now you're violating my trust here, and now you're stealing my voice. So I couldn't imagine. But please continue.
This is exactly why the Senate is pursuing the No Fakes Act. So right now there's a discussion draft going around, very, very early stages, and the Senate Committee on the Judiciary has been conducting hearings on the No Fakes Act to try to determine, should there be a federal right of publicity that prevents unauthorized digital replicas of a person without their consent. And I think one of the big concerns is that when it comes to AI replicas, it can be really disorienting for an individual if they don't have control over how replicas of themselves are being used and what they're saying. It's so much different from, for example, an actor who's speaking lines when they get to review those lines and perhaps make objections about how they're going to be portrayed. There was an excellent TV show on this, Joan is Awful from the Black Mirror series, that looked into this question of what happens if you sign your right of publicity away to some organization. And one of the concerns that's being raised with the current draft of the No Fakes Act is that it allows for transferability of name, image, and likeness. And I think that's a big concern. A lot of specifically women scholars are saying, look, we don't want to allow vulnerable actors to even have the potential to transfer their rights away to a corporation, even for limited periods of time, because that could mean that they really lose control over their right to consent as to how a specific use is being done. So it's really hard. I mean, you want to have some voice for AI systems, and you want an actor who's informed about that to be able to say yes to do that. But how do we protect the vulnerable? How do we protect young models and artists and actors against the types of manipulation that could happen to get them to sign away their own likeness in these situations? I know when I was a kid, I used to do modeling, and sometimes these contracts that you get to sign to give a license to your right of publicity or a release form, sometimes they would just hand it to you at the shoot while you're already, all done in makeup or whatever. And, you're a kid, you don't really know what you're looking at. So a lot of times, and their parents don't either, they'll just sign whatever the person tells them to sign. So it's really hard to say, what protections should we put in place? How much should we allow people to release the rights to their voice and likeness? And should we have things that allow people to take that down if somebody takes their voice or likeness without authorization? So right now, in the Copyright Act, we have this thing called notice and takedown, which is a procedure that allows copyrighted content to be taken down from platforms like YouTube or other internet platforms. And if we had something like this for deepfakes, I think that would be really beneficial, because one of the concerns about copyright infringement online is that, oh, well, this is a big harm if somebody's copyrighted content gets out without their permission. But you can imagine the kind of harm that can result if somebody uses your name or likeness for some of these AI models without your permission as well.
I get regularly people message me saying, when is Krista coming back? And you're the perfect person for this topic. I didn't know the modeling aspect and the legal background, so you can see it from so many different angles here. And so thank you for bringing a voice to this like this. I appreciate it. Any I mean, and what other thoughts are you thinking about this current situation? Because I remember when I saw Audrey Hepburn, they did a commercial of her CGI portrayal of herself, and I was like, one, this is weird as all hell. Second, she's long passed, and now would she want her body around for random corporation doing this ad? And it also reminds me of Albert Einstein, committed socialist, no problem with that, but now he's a mascot for Salesforce. If he was alive right now, he'd be like, what the hell? What's going on here?
Well, so the funny thing about right of publicity is because it's a state by state right, every state has different rules about the scope of the right of publicity. And only some states have what's called post-mortem rights of publicity that allow those who are dead to have their images and likenesses controlled by their heirs. And Tennessee, for example, is one example because of Elvis Presley. And other states that have famous people who have died and have powerful estates who are managing their rights have passed laws in those states to allow post-mortem rights of publicity, but not every state has it. And this is not something that is going to apply for somebody that dies in a foreign country, as a resident of a foreign country, for example, unless that foreign country's laws have some sort of restriction. So you have to look at where that individual died to try to figure out, is there a post-mortem right of publicity that could apply? Now, once the Senate passes something like the No Fakes Act, one of the considerations that they're engaged in is, should there be a post-mortem right to control your digital replica? And in the current draft, there is a post-mortem right, but a lot of scholars are saying that should not exist. Now, there's a question about how that jives with state laws that do allow post-mortem rights, like the ones that protect Elvis Presley's rights. But I think this is something that varies from state to state because different people have different perspectives as to whether the dead should be able to control the living when it comes to their right of publicity. On the one hand, you have people that view sort of the image and likeness as sacrosanct and saying, this is something that only my children or people that I authorize should be allowed to authorize. And others that say, look, they're dead. What does it matter? What harm does it do to them? So there's both sides of that, and that's an issue that really is well addressed by differences in state rights.
Right. My goal is when Joe passes away from natural causes to sell his likeness rights to Salesforce and to turn him into a character. That would be the ultimate trolling. If I can
Or
get
to
that
have
done.
him, if he dies in a state without post-mortem rights of publicity, you can go ahead and create a digital replica of him to continue on the podcast while he's gone.
This is why I have you on the show here. So we're gonna make sure if he years from now, if he's at the end of his life, I'll be like, can we move the hospital over to Texas just so he can pass away there? I'll pay for everything. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Krista, okay, so any other takes on the Scarlett Johansson situation that you think we've missed that's not being brought up right now? Because you've been...
Also, sorry. Thank you. I just think that this is a really interesting issue. I'm glad that the Senate is finally starting to address it. And I hope that we get some laws that make sure that we can protect individuals against unauthorized digital reproductions of their name and likeness, including when they're non-commercial. So Scarlett Johansson here is protected because most state rights of publicity would protect against commercial misappropriations like this. But there are many individuals whose name, image, and likeness are used without their consent, specifically deepfake pornography. 95% of the use of deepfakes is for non-consensual pornography. And I think that's something that could really be addressed well by the Senate to say it doesn't matter if it's commercially used. What matters is that it's causing harm. So I do think we need some sort of action to help protect those that are not protected under current state laws.
Agreed. Well said. Jonathan, any other thoughts before we move on to OpenAI's other drama, the whole equity thing?
Yeah, I was just thinking as Krista was talking, it reminded me of, it feels like this is done oftentimes in movies, specifically if an actor dies, actress dies during the movie. I remember it happened with Brandon Lee in Pro, and then it happened with the gentleman during Gladiator, and reproduced him digitally to finish the movie. Tupac performing on stage digitally at Coachella in 2012. You were there, Jordan. Come on. And of course, he had passed many years before. And so I just assumed that was all done with the cooperation of their state. But obviously, it happened after they passed. And those were pretty specific. Tupac was doing what we all saw Tupac do. And the other actors were just digitally reproduced so that they could finish the films that they were already doing. But it seems like there is some precedent in history for this.
Yes. So under the current right of publicity laws, an actor who's engaged in a movie production would have typically signed a release to the use of their name, image, and likeness for purposes of filming and promoting the film. And so digital replications of their name, image, likeness would fall within the existing scope of the release. Now, one question that arises with if we get a potential federal bill that's specifically directed to digital replicas is, are those existing releases sufficient to allow digital replicas? Under current state law, they cover digital replicas in most situations, except for those states that are now looking at passing their own digital replicas laws. But once we get some federal law that says, look, you have to get specific permission for uses of digital replicas, they might need to adjust the form of those releases to make sure that they include a clause that says the release will include the right to digital replicas of the actor for the purpose of continuing the movie or promoting the movie.
Interesting. One of our supporters, Bronze Rasta, a friend of mine who also plays bass like Kevin Eubanks from the Tonight Show band, says, how does this law hold up against alleged doppelgangers? If I feel and I look like a celeb, because he does look like Kevin Eubanks, and I see an opportunity for residual income playing bass like Kevin Eubanks, what's to prevent me from granting rights to my image to capitalize on my likeness?
Bette Midler case. So the thing that would stop it is that if somebody hires a lookalike or a sound-alike for the purpose of trying to extract the commercial value of the celebrity's image, then that would constitute a violation of that celebrity's right of publicity, even if it was not the celebrity, but it was a sound-alike or lookalike who was performing for the purpose of creation of that content.
Okay, so if he just said, I'm playing bass, I'm not trying to be Kevin Eubanks, I'm my own person who plays bass, then he's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and where OpenAI messed up was people are saying, well, the person voice you're hearing is not Scarlett Johansson, but they messed up being that they reached out to her twice and then tweeted her, so it looks like they were trying to do the Bette Midler, what Ford did to Bette Midler.
Yeah. It sure looks like this is a Bette Midler situation.
Gotcha. And we'll see if more facts come out about this, but right now it does not look good. So, Krista, what would you like to talk about more? The OpenAI NDA equity situation or California's new AI bill or something else we haven't talked about yet?
Either one. I think one thing that I wanted to note about the equity situation, maybe we can start with that,
okay.
Is that right now, we don't know everything about the scope of these contracts, but we do know that the FTC and California are taking very strong actions to try to stop non-competes and to try to make sure that there are not overly restrictive employment contracts that stop somebody from engaging in their profession or doing things that they need to do, like for perhaps whistleblowing, reporting crimes, reporting concerns. All of those are very important. And it ties in actually with the California proposal on AI, because the California proposal notes that we need to ensure that there are whistleblower protections built into any of the developments in AI.
Great point. So let me, for people who are not following the OpenAI equity story, I went to Perplexity and got a summary. OpenAI has faced criticism over the inclusion of a non-disparagement clause in its exit agreements for departing employees. Now, to be clear, I've been trying to get the contract to see what's going on here because some people are claiming this is a non-disparagement in your offer letter. And then some other people are saying, no, this is a non-disparagement in your severance, potential severance package. This clause threatened the potential forfeiture of vested equity if former employees spoke negatively about the company or disclosed the existence of the agreement itself. This issue came to light following the recent departures of prominent AI safety researcher Jan Lake and Ilya Sutskever. Their initial silence sparked speculation that it was due to the restrictive non-disparagement agreement. In response, Sam Altman acknowledged the existence of the clause and admitted it was a mistake, stating, "This is on me, and one of the few times I've been genuinely embarrassed running OpenAI. I did not know this was happening, and I should have." Altman confirmed that while the clause existed, OpenAI had never actually clawed back anyone's vested equity. He also announced that the non-disparagement clause would be removed from all future X agreements. The inclusion of such a clause raised concerns about OpenAI's transparency and potential silencing of critical voices, particularly those involved in crucial AI safety research. So, Krista, maybe you can talk about like just non-disparagement clauses. How common are those in like standard offers for companies, and how common are those in like severance and release agreements?
Yeah, I mean, as someone who's been in the space of looking at these offer letters and things like that, I'm sure that you often have seen some of these as well. They're much less common in offer letters or initial employment agreements as they are in termination agreements. So if you have some situation where someone is, for example, agreeing to take a severance package, and as part of that severance package, as part of agreeing to accept that package, they say they're going to have a non-disparagement clause. That's something that is often enforceable through a breach of contract action, and you can get your severance package revoked if you violate the terms of that contract, because it's sort of that clear quid pro quo of this, $200,000 severance was the result of agreeing to do XYZ as part of your severance. But in terms of, equity and salary and the kinds of things that you get for your ordinary employment, it's a lot harder to say that all of that was contingent on you agreeing to keep your mouth shut on something else. So it's much harder for for any company to get damages for breach of contract that would cover something like eliminating somebody's equity for some kind of violation of non-disclosure. It's just something where the remedies don't match up to the harm.
Perfect. Jonathan, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because I mean, you've been in many different corporations, you signed offer letters. Any thoughts in general?
I'm still in shock. I mean, I can tell you the last two companies I left, which I considered excellent places to work, didn't have a severance package because I left those positions. And I got the non-disparagement clause anyway. It was strongly suggested by HR. And so I thought that was unfortunate. I just feel like it's, if I was an employee who didn't have as much tenure in Silicon Valley, and I didn't have the privilege of being able to leave rather than taking a package on the way out, I wouldn't have the leverage to know that I was fully within my rights to totally ignore the repeated attempts to get me to sign voluntarily. I'm sitting here kind of in shock that OpenAI tried to do this, specifically with something that you already knew as part of your employment. It seems legally dubious that they could claw back any part of your earned employment compensation because you're signing an agreement, disparagement clause when you left. Having read these in detail before deciding to sign, in some cases and others, when severance wasn't there, there was no reason to sign it. I was also I'm really skeptical that these are easily enforced anyway. Mm-hmm. It really seems like if you were a brand carrying your ability to recruit employees, especially good employees, going after somebody that says something negatively about you in a tweet seems weird and threatening your ability to recruit overall.
Mm-hmm. Preach, continue. I was just going to say, like, this gave me flashbacks when I joined Slack. I am an HR person, but I'm an anti-HR person. I'm like in the old claymation Christmas special Rudolph. There was the Island of Misfit Toys, and that's what I feel like bringing them in HR, basically. And no one got that, but it's all good. So when I joined Slack, I decided to read the employee handbook. The reason why, not because I didn't want to, was because when I acquire companies, I'm going to acquire Jonathan. And I'm like, oh God, this guy's an executive. He knows his rights. He's going to read the whole thing and give me questions. So I got to be prepared. And I was looking at their outside activities clauses. And so outside activities is basically saying, this is when you're employed for Slack, these are things that we don't want you to do. And at Google, we had like a whole entire team that was basically telling you like everything in the world you couldn't do outside of work. It was just like, it was crazy. Slack was just basically like, don't create an enterprise chat app. that was it. And I went and told my VP of HR. I was like, wow, like that's pretty good. And she's like, wait a minute, you read that? You're probably the only person in the company that read it. I'm like, yeah, I know this is pretty liberal. This is great for me because when I do acquisitions, I'm getting a lot of people who are in startups. They have their hands in a lot of different pots. They might be working at this company, but they have a side hustle going on or whatnot. And I hate getting into those debates. Like I had situations where people were like, I donate my time. I'm an engineer, but I donate my time at my daughter's Girl Scout cookie club, and I help create their website. Like, do I have to send in a request to legal to see if I can do that? I'm like, yeah, you probably should do that. And I'm like dying saying that to tell them that. And I asked them, why is this so laissez-faire? And they said, well, everyone has their hands in different things, and if we were trying to get the best talent, we just got to make it open so they can do all their side hustles. They have no issues. So when I heard, and to be clear, I haven't seen the offer letter, nor have I seen the separation and release agreements here because we're getting all these different stories, and the person from NPR, or the person who broke this story wasn't NPR, I think it was like Vice or something, didn't ask a clarifying question like, was this in your offer letter documentation or was this in your exit documentation? But let's assume this was in your offer letter documentation, and when OpenAI was trying to get this top talent, which Jonathan astutely mentioned in our previous episode, one of the big things that held Apple back in AI was that they're so closed off that AI researchers wouldn't join because they couldn't publish and get their name out there. And OpenAI's big thing was like, we're open, but also you probably can still publish. So for them to have something in there saying there's a non-disparagement and type of clause, so you can't say anything bad about us ever again in the future, and you can't get your vested equity, I don't know how that would pass the mustard. And so for my assumptions are, this was in the severance agreement saying, hey, we want to give you a big pile of cash. You seem pretty upset the company and want to like grant some axes. If we give you hundreds of thousands of dollars, will you like not say anything for X period of time? And to me, I'm like, if it's a troublemaker, that sounds kind of fair. But the whole lifetime, you can't say anything about the company the rest of your life, and also you could lose your vested equity. That sounds amazingly punitive and foolish if such a thing that was in the original offer letter. So
and there's concerns around a lot of these agreements. And now, again, I haven't seen OpenAI's agreement specifically, so we don't know what it says. But a lot of the agreements that startups in California enter into with their employees are void. Now it puts, all it effectively does is put pressure on employees that are less senior and don't understand or don't have legal counsel to tell them that those provisions are void. But many of them are void in California, including if you have these non-compete agreements that go too far for a non-executive, but also if you have excessive restrictions on outside activities, that could also be void. And there may be situations where California law would provide that even if something is listed as prohibited in an outside activities document, you are in fact allowed to engage in that activity and keep the intellectual property for it, for example, notwithstanding your employment agreement to the contrary, because California has these additional protections for workers to try to prevent that.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense. Tip for people who are leasing property here in California, you might see in your lease agreement it says if you break this lease, you're on the hook for the rest of the rent. No, that's not how it works, because in California, there's a law that says if you do break and you notify your landlord, they have to then put the property on market and to their best of ability find someone, and that's when the clock starts ticking of you still owe them rent. But once they find a replacement for you, then you're off the hook for the balance of it. And I had to explain this to my friends, but no, I signed this agreement. Like, they had the right to all my money, my firstborn, and my kidney. It's like, no, that's not how it works here in California. You can't give your rights away that way. So
in most states, if you do what's called mitigation of damages, you are not liable for the damages. So if you find a replacement, you find some way to prevent the harm to the individual, you're not going to be liable for that harm.
Exactly. Okay, so we have 8 minutes. I don't think we're going to do justice to the AI Act from California, and I want to have you back on for this. Someone said in here, okay, let me read some of the questions. Someone said, sorry, but an astrolabe plus cello beats Jonathan's surfboard. Well done, Krista. Now, the astrolabe, I'm kind of cheating here. It's a tell. It's a Game of Thrones tell. Now, I have a question I want to ask you for a very long time, and you will be judged on this. what do you think of Game of Thrones shows seasons 1 through 5? And then what do you think about seasons 6 through 8? Go ahead.
Okay, so I really liked Game of Thrones, and
What?
I
No,
don't.
no, no, sorry, 1 through 5.
Okay, okay. I liked 1 through 5. I
Good,
liked, but I thought it was
good.
too violent for me. I didn't like.
Well, you're Canadian. We're American.
Yeah,
That's just the way it is.
yeah,
That's a normal
definitely.
that's a normal explanation.
So it was too violent for me. I had struggles watching it.
Good. That's a
But I
normal
like
response.
but I like the storyline. I like Daenerys.
Okay.
But and then the last episode, the last seasons, people are gonna hate me for this. I actually liked them better.
Me too.
Uh,
They
Me
weren't as
too.
they weren't
Sigh.
as
Glad I
aggressive.
found
They were
somebody else in
like
my tribe.
they were like trying to tie things up a little bit, and I don't know. I kind of liked them.
Turned into a normal, regular show for
Oh
normies and
no,
not
please
people who
don't.
read the book and couldn't wait to tell everybody, oh, but I read the book, so you don't have an opinion that counts.
So I talk about in the show that like I got to meet some of my heroes at Google. Like you meet public figures and you get to meet them personally, and then sometimes you meet people and you realize, oh God, like I wish I never met this person because now what I think of them feels so terrible now. And Krista is one of my heroes, and the fact that she likes seasons 7 and 8 is really tough. I still appreciate her and everything like that.
I
She,
think about it like in the Canadian mode, which is that it's very hard to find something that I don't like.
you're you're an amazing person. I want you to say that. You're so good, and you're the heart of the show, the conscience. Uh, Jonathan, inexcusable for a Bay Area person and American, but
I know, and
we'll still have you on the show.
I
Well,
know, but I'm unapologetic about it. I think they were just better TV.
okay, I will say I hate the people who are like, the book is better. Like I hate the hipster people who do that stuff. And it's like, well, obviously the book's better because it's like, what's the cost to build a set in your mind? Zero. What does it cost to build a set in real life? Hundreds of millions of dollars. So like, they gotta cut certain things off. So let me get to some questions, Krista. You're the best regarding that. You're gonna watch House of Dragons, though, right? You've been watching House of Dragons.
I haven't been watching it, but I will.
Okay, you haven't watched season 1 yet.
No.
You're missing some really good TV. Really good TV. Okay, so
I've been trying to restrict my TV because I feel like I'm losing so much productivity from all the things
that's
that I'm
okay, but
on.
you're super productive as it is. Give yourself a break.
How
Give
about
yourself a
that?
break. Okay. Question. Maybe already covered. This is from Coldy. But would a tribute to actress so and so, that's how ABBA lookalike bands, etc., work in the UK. So sorry, let me bring up the question back. Mark, here's your question. There are professional impersonators making a living doing that, often as comics. How will that play against these new uh how will this play against those people? Like if they're my job is we're a Beatles cover impressionist band and we make money doing this, and then let's say they decide to make an AI something to generate music like that or something. Like what does it mean for them in their business?
I think courts really look at this on a fact basis and they'll dig in to say, is this something where you were intending to commercialize the value of somebody else in order to extract from them, in order to extract the value of their likeness from them? And if you are a professional impersonator, you probably have something where you disclose that you're a professional impersonator. It's not a situation where you are trying to mislead people into believing that you're actually that person. So you're not trying to really extract the value of their likeness quite as much. I think courts would look at that very differently than some major organization putting together an advertisement or a platform or a product that uses the name, image, or likeness of somebody in a way that confuses consumers into believing that that is something from that person that they took it from.
Well said. No, thank you for breaking that down. I want to really quickly go to your channel because I think it's a crime against humanity that you only have 100 subs, and this is not your fault. It's your husband's fault, and it's my viewership's fault that we're not subbing your channel. Tell your husband very disappointed. So please make sure to sub her channel. She's gonna put out more content a
Yeah.
while from now. She's got a lot on her plate. So support her channel. The Kevin Eubanks impersonator said that cello behind really is gorgeous though. Cellos are just bass guitars that were raised in classical environments.
Oh,
So very nice. So again, Krista, Jonathan, thank you for joining us.